Yeah, I mean, this
That's
happened
about
right
it.
in the middle of the semester, right? So, like, how did you jump from? I mean, I remember you posted something right when it happened. You were saying like, "Oh, I had this whole semester plan, guest speakers, and it was going to be really exciting," and that all went out the window.
Yeah, I scheduled this really special semester all of living writers. So I had three writers were able to come in that happened before the pandemic hit and before the quarantine. But the other two, which were Javier Zamora, author of Unaccompanied, and Carlos Andres Gomez, author of Quito, and just wonderful people, their shows got canceled. So I was really disappointed. I also just had a book come out. So my book had a bunch of talks scheduled.
Mexican state of
All my
mind.
Mexican State of Mind. So all those events got canceled. So that really sucks. And I was really disappointed. But um, once we got into the quarantine, I realized like there's much bigger things at hand. And, I got over it pretty quick just because,
Right.
I mean, dealing with the pandemic is a much bigger issue than, my book coming out. And so while I was disappointed, then my efforts turned more towards my students and trying to like help my students get through the semester.
Yeah, I mean that's a really eye opening, at least for me. But I can see people having the same kind of experience where, you know, the pandemic, the lockdown happened, and then you're still focused. I mean, you're grinding, right? And so you're in your routine, and the pandemic comes, and your own inertia just keeps carrying you with all your worries and all your grinding, and the pandemic keeps you from doing the normal things you do. So, but instead of worrying about the pandemic, you worry about, oh, I can't do the things that I was going to grind on this week or this day or whatever, and then you stop and you're like, oh wait, that's I'm being silly. Like, a global pandemic is a serious thing. This is real life. It's not a movie.
Exactly, exactly. So I realized that, there are bigger things at hand. And yeah, I just turned all my focus to my students and trying to really like offer them like individualized feedback, instructions, stay connected to them individually. Like I email each one individually, like every couple weeks and make sure they're doing okay. I call some of them. A couple of them actually ended up contracting the virus. So that's very worrisome. So I've just been trying to check in on them, make sure their health is okay, and
Right.
just realize like there's so much bigger issues.
Yeah.
So
You got your PhD what in 2017. The book Mexican State of
yeah,
Mind. Give me the. I think I wrote it down right here. I have it right here. New York City and the New Borderlands of Culture. I mean, and
yeah,
that was your dissertation, right? It's based off your dissertation. And
yes, that
so,
was my dissertation.
I mean, my copy's on the way. I got Pure Bronx. I got Manteca.
Wow.
Um, and but the book, so Mexican State of Mind's on the way. I also want to read La Verdad. That seems pretty good. An international dialogue on hip hop Latinidades. But Mexican State of Mind, I want you to talk about that because I mean, on the last podcast we were talking about I'm Puerto Rican and Honduran, but Mexican culture is seeping in everywhere. I feel like there's a Mexicanization of Latino-ness. You know what I mean? Because if you're a Honduran, where I was raised, like there wasn't other Hondurans. There was Mexicans, so like a lot of my Latino-ness is Mexican, and now my wife is Mexican, so I'm Mexican culturally.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I definitely see my husband had to learn how to eat spicy food when he got with me.
I'm Puerto
Um,
Rican. All we like is sweet and fried, and she thinks Puerto Rican food is dry. And then I hated spice at all. I didn't like any spice, and now I take it super.
yeah,
I take it to five.
yeah, absolutely. So what you're saying about like Mexicanization, like what I was noticing in New York City was that there was like more and more Mexicans coming to New York City, and the data totally backs this up. And so what I was interested in is how they're adapting, especially the young people, how the young people are adapting to New York City and how like their identities are forming. And one thing I noticed is that a lot of young people were gravitating towards hip hop. And like either because they came as teenagers and hip hop was the way they learned English, or because they came as young adults and hip hop was something that they had heard from Mexico. But like hip hop and like hip hop crews and collectives and community, hip hop, like in its original form, was not about the individual. It was about forming community. It was about having fun. It was about parties. It was about also saying something about, it was also about narrating your life experiences. And these were all important aspects of hip hop that Mexicans, young Mexicans in New York gravitated to, especially because a lot of them even said they came to New York because New York was the foundation of hip hop. New York was where hip hop started. And so they were interested in New York in particular. So I thought that was super interesting. And I started investigating that. And that's what really is the book about. I have a chapter about graffiti. I have a chapter about hip hop. I have a chapter about activism. And I have a chapter about like community building. And it's cool. I was able to meet a lot of amazing young Mexicans, a lot of amazing people that I still am in touch with, tattoo artists, painters, break dancers.
Speaking of tattoo
really
artists, did you see that Netflix documentary with that photographer and tattoo artist duo? They're Mexican, Chicanos, and they're in LA, and they covered the whole like death row. They covered the whole 90s, the whole like Cypress Hill phenomenon. Yeah, they were like that's how they started. The photographer, he was the photographer manager for Cypress Hill in Europe or something like that.
Oh, that's so cool. No, I haven't seen that documentary,
really,
but I'll definitely, because I'm super into tattoos. I personally have a lot of tattoos as well.
What do they symbolize? I mean, I don't have any. And people who, when I go to the gym or something like that, people are like, wow, your skin is so, like, there's nothing on it, They're like, I want to just ink this up so bad.
Yeah, I actually, it was a big deal for my husband. He had never dated a tatted girl before, and he was really intimidated by me at first, even though, like, I'm not really an intimidating person. So it's funny to think of myself as intimidating because of my tattoos. But yeah, I have a bunch of tattoos done from now my friends who ended up being in this book.
The tattoo artist?
So it from the tattoo artist. So
That's
it became
badass.
my community. Yeah.
I mean, I think the whole tattoo thing is like when you see a girl with tattoos, or anybody with tattoos, you expect them to be, I mean, for lack of a better phrase, like in your face, right? Like just people who get tattoos are like that, But that's just an old school way of thinking of what people who get tattoos are, Now they're everybody.
That's why I actually love having tattoos because, like, for my students, they see my tattoos and, like, they see, like, there's not one way to be a professor. Like, you can be a professor and you don't have to be an old guy in, like, a suit. You can be, like, a young woman, like, with tattoos, like, who just, like, rock the Si Se Puede shirt. You know what I'm saying? And it's just that way they see that there's different ways of being smart.
Yeah, exactly.
I had someone say to me once, "You don't look smart." And what does that even mean?
Yeah.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
I mean, obviously, I get the same thing. If people are like, "Oh, do you work here?" I'm like, "No, I don't work here." This is, but I get that a lot. But yeah, I mean, especially if I came into a class and I see my professor has a tattoo or tattoos, you just I can be a professor because like now I don't want to. If you walk into a class and your professor's all stuffy and stuff, you're like, I want to be a professor, but if that's how I have to be a professor, then I'd rather not. But if the professor's cool, tattoos, one you're thinking like, okay, this professor's not going to be like a fucking stuck up, like snooty or whatever. She's cool. She's going to be honest. But I feel like a square not having tattoos because I think people think I'm a square, but I just don't know. I don't know. I don't have anything to get that I'm like, I need to put this on my body. Like there is a symbol, a Sumerian symbol. Supposedly it's the first written word, and it's a Sumerian symbol for liberty. It's the Liberty Online library symbol. That's the only thing I'm thinking of getting. My wife has Chinese letters, and with her last name, but I mean, we've been thinking about getting tattoos. Maybe doing the couple thing. Are you and your husband thinking of doing the couple thing, getting tattoos on the same day?
We do actually have a couple of tattoos.
There you go. What is it of?
That's how we got engaged. We have infinity signs. with each other's name on it, so we can't get divorced at all.
You know, but tattoos are removable, for sure. Or they can make it into a cartoon, you know, make the infinity size into eyes or something like that.
I told him if we ever separated, I just say that he died. And then I get sympathy points.
And then you get a lot of brownie points. But, I mean, we kind of got off the tattoo. We kind of got into a tangent, but that's what the podcast is for. I get into a lot of tangents. But the hip-hop thing is interesting because when I moved out to the suburbs, again, I was the only Honduran Puerto Rican in the suburbs, right? There was a lot of Mexicans. There was a lot of Guatemalans. But then there was a lot of Polish immigrants, Russian. And we were all poor, right? And the one thing we had we all had different cultures, right? Immigrant cultures. The Russians came from Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. But the one thing we had in common is that we liked, Death Row. We liked Tupac. In my neighborhood, it was Bone Thugs, right? And so that was a way to come together. And then within that group, then you find out about our differences. But, our first love was hip hop and basketball, right? Really, Is that what you're finding? Mm-hmm. Is that what you found in the research? It took you 10 years talking to people and stuff like that? I mean, how do you go about researching something like this?
I did 10 years talking to people. It started because I was working in restaurants. And so I worked with a lot of Mexicans.
Right.
And then we would just get to talking about music and whatnot. And they were into hip hop. And not only were they into hip hop, they produced their own music. And so they would share some of their music with me. And I would be like, oh, this is super dope because it's not just hip hop, but it's the way the music is their inspirations are they want to be like Nas and Biggie, but in Spanish. So it's New York style. It's a clean, kind of crisp sound, not too overdone, with a real emphasis on the lyrical, on the MC's ability. And I just really liked the music. And I wasn't even a big hip hop fan before it because when I was younger, it was in the 90s and hip hop was really, really it was really violent and
it was mostly boys, right? There's nothing for girls there.
Hardcore, right? And it I grew up in upstate New York, and so I was just this isn't my music.
Yeah, you used to birds and squirrels and shit.
Exactly. I listened to Selena. Yeah. That's who I listened to.
I mean, Mexican 90s girl. Who didn't? I mean, this is how un-Mexican I was when I came to the suburbs. I came to the suburbs right around when Selena died, and everybody showed up everybody was crying. They had Selena shirts when she died, and I didn't know who Selena was. So I thought it was somebody's cousin or sister, and they all made shirts because that's what happened too. And that's how I found out about Selena after she died.
Yeah. So I had all her CDs, and that was my music. And then when I was in college, reggaeton was really big, and I would go to the club to dance to reggaeton, but I didn't really listen to it outside of the club because again, it was a little bit misogynistic, or not a little bit, but definitely. So when I heard this music from now my homeboys, it was just totally different. It was about Mexican experience in New York. It was about immigration. It was about economic problems. It was about and I asked him how come you guys how do you feel about reggaeton? And they're reggaeton's fine, but it's I don't have money, I don't have chains, I don't have girls, so it doesn't reflect my experience. Wow. So I'm gonna do something that reflects my experience. And so,
it's so funny how they came down on the Nas side of it, because that's a huge debate, right? That's a huge split. That's a schism, right? That's the Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox. That's Biggie versus Tupac, Jay-Z versus Nas, Drake versus Kendrick. Do you like that flashy pimp, or do you like the street poet, right?
Yeah, no, they're total New Yorkers, though. The New York sounds totally influenced who they are and how they create music and just their style.
And they're from Mexico. That's so funny. That's, and you see that in Japan, in Japan, the kids are doing cholo culture, and they do the hot rods and shit like that. And it's you guys are in Tokyo. How do you guys know about this at all, But that's the power of hip hop. Hip hop is really the most powerful culture that we've seen, like maybe in history, right? Like it's what almost what Roman culture was aspiring to, right? Or British culture.
Yeah. And it's an accessible like form of poetry. Like I think of hip hop as like one of the many branches of poetry, like
Right.
alongside spoken word. And so it's amazing that like when people say people don't read, people don't enjoy literature anymore, I'm like, they do. It's just through the form of hip hop a
Right.
lot of times, right? And I mean, think of these young Mexicans. They're writing. They're writing their own lyrics. They're writing poetry. It's impactful. And more than that, they're like forming communities. So they're like creating support systems for each other in a place where in New York, like the majority of Mexicans are undocumented. Like the majority of them have shit jobs. The majority of them live in really small housing spaces. And so this is like a way for them to like escape in some ways. And
Which is what hip
and
hop's been
form
since the
community.
beginning, right? And it's so great that here comes another wave of immigrants. They come here and they're
Yes.
they're in the same position that the Bronx was in, right? In the late 70s or whatever. And they're doing the same thing. They're making something beautiful out of, what they see as a desert, a cultural, spiritual desert for them. There's nothing for them. And so they create something.
Yeah. So that's really what the book is about. It's about community. It's about hip hop. It's about young men and women being creative in hard times. So it is a lot like that story of the Bronx.
And
That's what it was, men and women being creative in hard times.
And people say like that hip hop isn't poetry just because when they think of poets, they think of like Robert Frost or Whitman or Martí or something like that. But poetry started with music, right? In ancient Greece, right? Where like anytime there was a poet, they recited verses to song, right? The lyre and whatnot.
Yeah. And I think I would like to see lots of poets try and write hip hop lyrics. It's mad hard. Like there's mad respect. Like I can't do it.
If you're young, you've tried. Everybody's tried, and you're like, holy shit. Okay.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah.
So I give a lot of respect to those that are able to do it.
And it's almost like they train them. I mean, not almost like they do train themselves because they're always writing rhymes. They're always either writing rhymes by themselves, spitting in a circle or something like that. And they do that because I know people from back on the block. Like that's what they do. They're still doing it. Trying to get a record deal, and they've been doing it for like 10 years, and they're really good. It's just that they're whatever they're saying is just not connecting, but they're really good.
Right.
I mean, so do you?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
are these guys gonna publish, I guess, right? Publish a CD, come out with a CD. That'd be badass. Like Mexican immigrant rap from New York.
That would be interesting for them to create like a compilation CD. I'll throw it to them. That's a great idea. Like they put music out on like Spotify and like YouTube and all the time.
It's crazy how you have to go on like stuff like SoundCloud to really find out. Like, 'cause like the radio, I'm so bored of the radio, And then you think, oh, the music's dead. But then if you go on SoundCloud or something like that and you listen to a lot of indie stuff, you're like, why don't they put this on the radio? Like, holy shit, we've been listening to the same shit for 10 years on the radio. And meanwhile, underground, people are revolutionizing, evolving, mixing things up. And we don't get to hear that. Like, the radio doesn't get to hear that. I feel like sometimes they bore us intentionally. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I do know what you mean. It is. I don't listen to the radio much either.
What do you listen to, like Spotify and stuff like that? Well, I'm sure like people like send you CDs, and now that you're in your position, people know like right, they send you CDs and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I listen to a lot of stuff on YouTube a lot. I just watch music videos on YouTube of people I know who recommend. If you're looking for an entry point into Mexican hip hop in New York, look up Hispanos Causando Pánico. They're awesome. HTP. Buen Dia Brooklyn, Audrey Funk, all awesome artists that are making music out of New York right now.
I mean, so you're a very, I downloaded your CV. I wrote, I went through all your stuff. You're very accomplished academic. and young. You know, I mean, where you get the impression, I get the impression that this was you had an idea of what you wanted to do very early on. But where does that come from? I mean, you started where? You started at
Actually,
NYU, right? You did a double major in journalism and what was it?
yeah, I wanted
Latino
to be a
studies?
journalist. I wanted to be a journalist when I was younger, and so I was a journalist actually. I worked for like 2 years as a journalist, and then I realized I didn't really like journalism that much because I didn't get to cover the stories I wanted to cover. There's a lot of like top down, um, limitations to what you can cover. I worked for NBC News. It's funny, my husband's a journalist now, and he has to fight for diversity of stories all the time. So I married what I didn't become.
But
And then
I mean, that must help because you understand it too, right? You understand his. I mean, in a way, you're almost like, you know what? Like, I gave up that fight, but good for you to keep fighting that, man, because you know the fight.
absolutely, and it needs to be
Right.
done. Journalism is one of like the weirdest places out there, but so is academia.
Yeah.
So after a couple years off, I worked like in restaurants. I worked in offices, just kind of like administrative jobs. And one, I was bored, and two, I got tired of working these jobs, so I decided to go to grad school. Um, and in grad school, my first semester of grad school at Fordham University, I met this professor that changed my life named Mark Mason. He's the one I wrote
He
the Pure
co-wrote
Bronx
Your
with.
Bronx with you, right?
So he's the one who really like has always been like, go get a PhD, like publish. Like he's been a real force in my life, like supporting me through all of that. And I think one of the biggest hurdles that I jumped early on was a lot of people wait a long time to publish. Like they wait until they're in their last year of their PhD. And I didn't really see the point to that. If I was already published writer as a journalist.
Right.
I think that helped me have like more like thinking that work should be published like quicker and just get out there. And so I think that's why my mentality is different. I write pretty fast. I think because of that training as a journalist. I have kind of a real like impulse to get like ideas out there. Like now it takes me 6 months or a year or something, but it doesn't take, sometimes it takes like 5 years or, I mean, Mexican State of Mind took 10 years, but I did a bunch of projects in between. And so I think that's, seeing my name in print at a young age, I kind of got addicted to it.
Yeah.
I love seeing my name, So that's why I continued publishing even when I was in grad school, even when some of my advisors were like, you don't need to be publishing right now. And I'm like, well, but why wouldn't I be publishing right now if I have ideas,
But that's like a changing of the guard. That's like a changing of the culture, right? And we're still ruled, but because they're still around, right? The people who are in their 60s and 70s, they still run things. They run the way things are, and they have a way of thinking like that. I was the same way. Like I did blogging and then journalism, and then maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, man, fuck journalism, fuck politics. I've been writing. You're writing journalism and you're writing opinion pieces, and then the country goes and elects Trump, and then you're like, okay, so nobody's listening. Okay, and then so I'm like, all right, I'll write a novel or write short stories, and it's fun. But then you got to, then you're editing for months. You're editing for weeks or months, and it's like when you're so used to writing every day. At one point I'm writing three articles a day for being Latino. You're so used to just like, and also coming up with opinions and forming arguments right away, And I think if you don't have that training as a journalist or as somebody who publishes regularly, you see it. People are like, what do I write about? What do I write about? I'm like, what do you mean? Aren't all these ideas buzzing in your head and you have to pick one? You don't know which one to pick?
Or you become a perfectionist about your work where you're like, I'm going to keep editing this forever. And then it takes, 10 years for an article to come out, because you've been editing it for 5 years. I see that a lot in my field, actually, where people are overly perfectionist. And I think it should be more about a circulation of ideas than.
But that's an insecurity, right? And I found that out by myself. That perfectionism is an insecurity. Yeah. Like you have to realize that even your not perfect product that you produce. That's a lot of P's.
Yeah.
Even that is good, and you can share it with the world, But if you're so insecure, then you're like, no, they can only see me at my most perfect, and you see that with everything, especially with social media. Like we're all performing for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think any of my work is perfect. I would go back and edit a lot of it if I could, but it's out there now. So on to the next thing, I'd rather just get my ideas out there, and then maybe that opens me up to criticism more than other people, but I'm okay with that. I can take the criticism. I can take
Well,
the
yeah, I
heat.
mean,
So
greatness comes with criticism, right? There's nobody who's great and nobody criticizes that person. You know what I mean? Yeah, but like, so but would you say you're mostly, or when I see you publishing, when I see you like writing, most of it kind of comes back to poetry. So would you say you're a poet?
yes, I'm definitely a poet. I think that's like my first identity is as a poet. And then as an academic comes second. Because I think more in poetry. When I have difficulty understanding something, when I'm like working through a difficult article, I write it down more as poetry, and that's how I get through. Even like in grad school, when I was like studying like really advanced theory, I would write poems in response, and instead of taking notes. So yeah, I think anything difficult, hard times, that's where I come back to is poetry, and I love reading poetry too.
And poetry is the hardest thing there is with words. It's the hardest thing you can do with words, right?
I don't know. I think for me, sometimes poetry comes easier than other words. Like,
well, that's why you're a poet.
I
mean, don't they say like, okay, a novel's hard, right? Short stories are harder, and then the poem is the hardest, right? Because you're getting down. A poem is an essence of something. You're trying to make somebody feel something in as little words, like very little, just images almost, feelings, colors, That's hard. That's really hard. And when you said I think in poetry, I was like, damn, like how do you think in poetry? That's crazy. But I guess you do.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's strange though. People be like, you must have been a poet your whole life. And it's funny. I didn't start writing poetry till I was 26. So it came to me later in life. But
how were you as a kid? I mean, you read a lot, or?
I wrote like short stories and novels, or tried to write novels. There's pictures of me like creating like kids books with like full stories. And so I'd say I always was a writer, but I was intimidated by poetry. I thought poetry wasn't for me. And what I realized it was because I didn't like the poetry that was being given to me. I didn't like Shakespeare. I didn't like Robert Frost. I didn't like, I don't know, I might get into trouble. I didn't like Walt Whitman. It didn't connect to me on a personal level. And it wasn't until later that I got into like Latino literature, listening to spoken word, although I'm not a spoken word poet, that I was like, wow, this is my experience. And they're using language that I can relate to. It doesn't all have to be.
And then when you come to that realization, like as a kid, because as a kid, you take the adults' opinions for granted, right? Like if they say this person's a great poet, Whitman's a great poet. I like Whitman, but I also went to Robert Frost Elementary School, so I like Frost too. But I get what you're saying, because like people say I like Bukowski, and in I guess in the mainstream or in the elitist circles, Bukowski's not a great poet, right? But I read a lot of poetry, and I like Bukowski. Like he speaks to me. I get what he's doing, and I think he's doing it like masterfully. And for me, that's all that matters, right? But then you come to that realization where like, oh, like just because a certain group of people say this is great doesn't mean that you can't like these other things. Like poetry, art is for the beholder, isn't it? I mean, which would lead me to my next question. Like, where do you see the state of hip hop right now? Like people like Bad Bunny, or this kind of, I like the fusion of like Latin music with hip hop. I'm like, okay, that should have happened a long time ago. But the kind of music that's coming out, I'm Nas, right? I'm a Nas fan. The kind of music that's coming out is boring for me lyrically.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, but I stepped away from the mainstream a while ago. You know, I listen mostly to like music in my community, and that's what I listen to. I don't listen so much to the mainstream music anymore. Although, in terms of lyricists, I think J. Cole is underrated for
It's sad to
sure.
see what
And
happened to
there
him.
is,
Like he kind of got discouraged by like
yeah,
he saw what the game was. I saw him at this club here. And he was right here, and he was high as fuck. He came out like 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was high as fuck, and he was just talking to the audience, and he looked sad. This was like 2 years ago. He looks sad, and now you hear the rumors that he's retiring. But like you see people like Lupe Fiasco, same thing happened to him. Same thing's kind of happening to Kendrick.
yeah,
Like you're trying to be a really great lyricist, but the market, there's a market, it's a business, and the best
yeah,
doesn't always get the most success, which is weird with
yeah.
capitalism, right? It doesn't. Didn't your Yeah, I mean, this is the I'll read the description that I read of Mexican State. Examines the creative worlds and cultural products of Mexican migrants in New York City within the context of a system of racial capitalism that marginalizes Mexican migrants via an exploitative labor market, criminalizing immigration policy and racialized system of surveillance. So that's, I mean, that's bringing. Are you a Marxist?
What?
Are you a Marxist?
I studied with Marxists, so yeah, I would say so.
I mean, there's that lens of like that. Now you have to start examining mainstream music, right? Now you have to start criticizing it as a part of that system, right? It's being used to, like we said, I guess bore people, right, or just give them candy, give them not steak but candy, right?
Yeah, like almost subdue the population in some ways.
Like an opiate, just. So, what do you say? Do you ever get? You must get in arguments with people who say, "No, Bad Bunny is that's what the people want." You hear it all the time, right? What the people want. Don't you believe in democracy, majority, the people? What the people want, that's what's good. And you're like, I mean, I get your argument, but with art, there's how do you judge good art? I'll throw it out there to the
Right.
poet.
I have students come into my classroom every day, and they're like, "I don't like poetry. I don't like poetry. I hate poetry."
That was the same one.
And my thing is, you haven't heard the right poetry, or you haven't read the right poetry. And I feel like I can get anyone to like poetry, but they're not exposed to the diversity of poetry. And so I think that happens with music if people aren't exposed to the diversity of music. And the problem is that there's a system like that's controlling, very closely controlling what is commercial, what is accepted, what messages are allowed, and those systems are not interested in a diversity of opinions or a diversity of
Or the enlightenment
of
of the
music.
masses, right? Because good music enlightens you.
Right, they're not interested in that, and that has a lot to do with media conglomeration, the fact that our like music and media industry is controlled by less and less people, right? There keeps being more and more conglomerate, right? Like NBC is owned by Time, that's owned by Time Warner, that's owned by something else, that's a car company that, you know, and so they don't have very much interest in putting out anything that's difficult, that's complex, right? It's just, let's just feed the masses, right? Let's keep them subdued. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, because the corruption is complex. Their corruption, the system is complex, and so if you give people great music, great art, great books, great everything that are complex, then you're training them to deal with complex issues and thoughts and ideas, and then they can turn that muscle on the system and see it for what it is. So if you never train the people into thinking that way, you can keep them like sheep, and they'll never even know. They'll have no inkling, right? Happy pigs, right? Ignorance is bliss. I don't know if you saw that Motown documentary about how I think it's on Showtime or something like that. It's like, Motown came out in, 60 in Detroit, And they were saying like that's because in the 50s and 40s, the public school system in Detroit was really good. Like they had a really robust music program.
Yes.
And so that's what you get. That's the fruit of that. Great music.
Yeah. Same thing happened. Same thing. The Bronx has this horrible rap, but in the 40s and 50s, had one of the best music programs in public schools and produced all these great singers in the 60s. There's a lot of the Motown singers also came out of the Bronx in the 60s, and then produced soul and produced salsa. Salsa's from New York, right? And that's young people having access to music, right? One of the reasons why hip hop is how it is, why it's not melodic, is because of the disinvestment in schools in music programs, right? And that's why they had to create the music the way they could, without melody, without instruments.
I mean, what do you think about that? You know, we were hearing STEM, and now you hear STEAM, but like, talk about why that A is so important, right? Why just teaching STEM, you know, that you end up like China, right? You end up in like places. You hear stories in China where like they don't know how to use their imagination because they never were trained like that to come up with a story, paint a picture, anything you want. It was always like, paint the dear leader, you know, doing this, you know. So you can't use your imagination. You see that with kids now. Like I have, you know, not to throw anybody out of the bus, but I have a 15-year-old stepdaughter, and you know, when she was coming up, it was the kids didn't use their imagination. They're like, what do I draw? What do I write? And I'm like, use your imagination. And they're like, and it stressed them out. Use your imagination, stress them out. But talk about that A. Why is that A so important in STEAM?
I think, unfortunately, school is going that way, though. The schooling, the way we're going in the education system right now, is going towards taking away creativity and teaching towards the test.
Right.
Right. That's one of the most dangerous things that's happening right now. But I get students all the time that come in to college and they don't really know how to express their own opinions. They only know how to regurgitate material. And so you have to kind of like unteach them what they've learned in public schools and high schools in New York, because they've learned towards a test.
Yeah.
And it can be really difficult to get them. And some students don't ever really get it. They just stay and sit in the back of the class and never really say anything, or struggle writing papers. And so I think it's a major problem right now that we're facing in our school system, actually.
Yeah, I was just reading something in the Journal of Higher Education or something like that. They were talking about how, college professors are seeing like really bad, college term papers writing is notoriously bad, but now they're saying the new crop, new kids coming in, like they really do not know how to write. I mean, what's the problems? I guess what are the problems?
They've been taught like formulas, like
the core curriculum, right? Teaching core.
They don't know how to think beyond it. And I don't think they're teaching them how to write like arguments anymore. They're teaching them just to write like, I don't know what they're teaching exactly, but it's not how to make an argument, which is like the core of any good writing. Is you have to be making an argument in some way.
Just in human life, right? Like it's not about literature. This is about like surviving the world. You're going to get into arguments with people about your pay, in your relationship, in your friendship. How are you going to express yourself? Your position, how you feel. Exactly. And like my daughter will come to me and, she'll say, or she doesn't do it anymore. She's actually a really good writer now, but she used to come to me and say like, well, how do I write this paper? I'm like, no, just do it like, how you're explaining something that you really like to me and you tell me everything about it and why you like it. Just do like that. They're like, no, but the teacher says we have to do this, this, and this. I'm like, don't think about that. If you do like this, if you just explain it, use your words, it's going to be good. And they're like, they're so worried about hitting that, whatever that regimen or whatever that requirement is.
Yeah, exactly. And it means that they don't have that like impulse to try things out, to make mistakes, right? They're too worried about, doing things right, that they're not
we're almost teaching perfectionism, right? Which we just admitted was so debilitating, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so the other thing, I mean, jumping ship here. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is you're a runner, marathon. How many marathons have you ran?
I've run 16
16. I can't do the math, but you know, it's a lot.
marathons.
Have you been always running? Were you in cross country? I was in cross country all 4 years in high school. Were you in cross country, or how did you get in? Writers and running? There's a thing about it, right?
Yeah, because running allows you to think, and you're by yourself. I don't like any other sport, really. I don't like going to gyms. I don't like working out in groups. I like to be by myself completely. It's my alone time. But no, I was actually a soccer player and I still love soccer. I love watching soccer. Every once in a while, I still play a pickup game of soccer. But mostly I run. And I actually only started like 4 years ago.
Oh, really?
Running.
But you run a lot in soccer. Isn't it like something like a 5 mile average per match or something like that?
I guess so, something like that. But between like college and like grad school, I like stopped doing so much of that until I actually had my first year of grad school. I had like a really, really like tough time like acclimating to grad school at Yale, and actually dropped out for like a semester and wasn't sure if I was going to go back. And that's when I found running as like kind of a place to like center myself, find my feelings, deal with the stress.
That's awesome.
Do something healthy, find some balance, you know, because like grad school is like notoriously like unbalanced. So yeah, maybe 4 or 6 years I've been running now. And then I just kept running longer and longer. I started with a mile. People are always like, you know, how do you run such long distances? I was like, I just kept running longer and longer until I did a half marathon, and I liked the half marathon. And then I did my first marathon on a total win. I put myself in a lottery for the New York City Marathon, and my first year I got selected for the lottery. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to run it. And then it's like a bucket list item, like checked off and it's done. But I freaking loved it. So I love the experience. I love the crowd. And so now I run marathon like not anymore because we can't run marathons anymore. But I run a marathon like every 3 months or so.
Yeah, you're always running. I'm like, isn't this girl a professor? She's like a professional runner now. She's going to fucking Olympics and shit.
Yeah, I really like the challenge. It's a mental challenge. To run a marathon is more a challenge than a physical challenge at times.
Yeah, because that's the whole thing with running, right? Like your whole body's saying, stop, this hurts. Like, don't do this. Just stop, go home, eat a donut. And every step is willpower, right? Every step.
Yeah.
And to push yourself, keep going faster, maybe, you know? Oof.
Exactly. So I love it. I love running.
And they say something about like they're doing studies they've done studies of how like, yeah, your physical movement of your body is related to your thinking process. Like if you're moving your body, it's easier to think. Like, I don't know about you, but with me, like if I'm on the phone, I hate talking on the phone, which is why usually the podcast, even before I was on YouTube, the podcast was video because I can't talk to just a voice. But if I am talking on the phone, I walk around, I pace around, and it just helps me think. I don't know, people, and my wife's like, "Why are you so fidgety? Why are you so?" But they find out that actually fidgeting, there's another thing, right? The fidgeting during a test or in class helps you think. Yeah, I
didn't know that, but I'm a big fidgeter, so that makes sense to me.
So
and yeah, whenever I'm starting a project, like going for a run, I figure it out.
Or, you know, if I have writer's block or if I don't know what to write about, I just go walk the dog for an hour or run. And all these ideas, you know, like, you know, I smoke weed, but like even on the walk, I'm not smoking. I haven't smoked all day. I only smoke after dinner. But when I'm walking, I get that high feeling, or when I'm running, I get that high feeling of like all these ideas coming to me and like sentences coming perfectly, right? And of course, when you go to your desk, it's like, okay, how did I say that? How did that sentence come out? But like when you're running and when you're walking, for like, and you're in your zone, it just all these pieces come together.
Yeah, Yeah, I totally agree. But like, so anyway, people think I'm like this huge exercise buff, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I just like running. That's it.
And soccer. I
So
mean, soccer's hard. Soccer, I stayed away from. I did that thing that kids do. I'm like, I hate soccer, but I sucked at it, so I didn't like want to play it. You know what I mean, that's why I said it. I hated soccer. Now I love it. I love watching it, but playing it's hard, man.
playing is hard. Yeah, I love it.
It's not like
I like,
baseball or something like that where you're just chilling outfield or whatever.
yeah, and it's always a thing because I usually go do pickup games, and it's mostly men, and they're like, "What is this girl doing here?" And
And
I'm
you got
like, "Don't worry,
tattoos, and they're like, okay, here we go. No, so
I'll
like you're running a marathon. You must have hit the wall. Where do you hit the wall? 13, 14, 15?
hit a wall every time. There's never a marathon where you don't hit a wall."
Okay, so what? Go walk me through that. I guess that's my fear of running a marathon. Like that wall is gonna be like fucking grueling, man. And how do you feel? What do you do? What do you tell yourself?
You just focus on every like step or every mile. You just like, I just tell myself, I'm going to do one more mile, just one more. Right. And then that mile comes and I'll be like, I'll do one more. And then after, like, I'll tell myself I can walk later. Right. I can walk after the next mile if I want
Giving
to.
yourself treats, but later. Promising yourself treats later.
Exactly. And so I just keep telling myself one more mile and then I'll walk or I'll quit or I'll do whatever. But,
That's crazy because like on the podcast, it's come up so many times that I tell people like I have so many ways of tricking myself into doing the thing that I want to do, but I don't want to do. You know what I mean? Like I know
yeah.
I want to do this intellectually, mentally, I want to do this, but physically I don't. And so I trick myself. What's up?
Have you done a half marathon?
No, I mean I've ran 13 miles we ran a 13-mile once for some reason for cross country, but
Right.
no, I haven't done a half marathon. No.
Just try a half marathon, see how it feels, and then if you enjoy it, then you go for the full marathon.
Yeah, I
It's
mean
not that much longer.
I have a friend here who's thinking of doing a half marathon, but I don't know if you ever ran in have you ran in Vegas? Like the air quality here is terrible. I'm from Chicago, right? So you have humidity, there's flat, and I thought I was doing 5 miles when I came here, and when I got here, I'm like, all right, I'll keep doing 5 miles. First day, a mile and a half, and I was like, my throat was sore, my chest was like my bronchies, like my grandma would say, were sore.
Yeah, that happened to me in Florida when I visited my husband's family once in Orlando, and I went for a run, and it was like I felt like I couldn't run at all. The air was so much on me, and it was really tough. But I guess living there, it's something you'd have to get used to.
Where's the craziest place you ran? It's Friday.
Craziest place I've ran. I think I did a pretty awesome marathon in Hawaii once.
Ooh.
And that was absolutely beautiful. And it was also downhill mostly. So it was just like floating down the hill.
Falling with style.
Yeah, it was great. That's one of my favorite marathons. And then I love the New York City Marathon. The New York City Marathon, there's nothing like that because there's nothing like New York City crowds. They come out and they support you like no one else. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great thing about a race. You know, there's people watching. And so that's another motivator, right? Like, you want to quit. You want to quit, but you're not going to stop and start walking in front of these people.
Stop in front of anyone. Exactly. My pride.
They came to see a marathon and they're all excited. And then you're walking, your lazy ass is walking right in front of them. And you're going to be that girl. We saw this lady stop and start walking.
Yeah. No, I'm very prideful about that stuff.
Do you run in, I was a mudder. Like my best time was ever in a race was on a muddy, rainy day. And they said, oh, you're a mudder. So, I mean, do you like running in the rain, sun, night?
I like a light rain because like, so this one I did in Hawaii that was like really, it was a good one. It started at 5 a.m. because it gets so hot there. So it was nice and cool and like before the sun came out. And then the last hour of it got super hot. And that was no fun. Like the last hour, you're tired and then the sun's out and it's just like baking you. So yeah, but I don't like cold running. Some people like cold running. Yeah. Some people like running in the wintertime. I hate running in the wintertime. I do it I find my running goes down a lot. I don't run as much in the wintertime because I don't like it, but I have like the winter running gear. So I can go out at like 30 degrees, 20 degrees, not really colder than that.
See, I
It's too
wouldn't do
cold.
that. I had like I had a rule back in Chicago, like 45 and above. So like that took out a lot of my summer, my winter. But in the winter, I would run on a treadmill. I hate running on a treadmill. How do you feel about that? Like, I hate the treadmill because like you're not going anywhere. It's way easier to stop on a treadmill because you can just press stop and go home. Like when you're running, you're out. So what are you gonna do? Walk back home? No, might as well run back home. It's the quickest way home.
Yeah, that's the whole thing about running. It's like you go out somewhere and you can't just like you have to run back.
Yeah, right. It's like
Only way to do it, especially when I go on long runs, I'll go like out like 6-7 miles, and then the only way to get back is to run 6-7 miles back. You know?
Yeah. And
like I don't even subway card. I don't let myself get on the subway. I don't run on the subway with a subway card or buy a subway route. I just
run.
Tricking yourself. It's all tricking yourself. I have routes, you know, that don't go near anywhere, so that I'm just stuck out there.
Yeah, I feel like when I was a kid, I was so lazy, and just my adult life has been gradually learning ways to trick myself into becoming a better person. You know.
I think that's all adulthood, is tricking ourselves to do things.
Yeah, I mean, you come to that stage where you're like, oh, my parents didn't know what they were doing. Oh, they were just people. Oh, like because now I'm my age when I remember what my parents were like, and I was like, oh, they were my age. Oh, that no wonder it didn't work out. You know, like they were just kids.
Yeah.
You know.
That's crazy. That's right. I'm now like my parents' age when they had. Well, I was like a child now, but
I did some, I do some due diligence, and your mom is from the Green Bay area. Is that right?
Yeah.
You go back there a lot? I've never been to Green Bay. I'm from Chicago, but we went to the Northwoods, but never Green Bay. Talk about cold, man.
Times. Yeah. I don't go there much. I'm closer to my family that's in Mexico City, so I go to Mexico City more.
Is that where your Mexican side is from? Or wait, you're pure Mexican, or you're?
My father's from Mexico City, and then my mom's from Green Bay, so she's not Mexican.
Yeah, I mean that's so all the Latinos that I bring on here, they're always. I mean, I guess back in the day you just met more people who were like just Mexican, just Puerto Rican, but now it's just like I'm Mexican, Honduran. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm married to a Paraguayan. So when I have kids, it's going to be Mexican Paraguayan.
And they're going to ask them, what are you? And they're going to be like, just never mind.
Paraguayan.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then who knows? I mean, are you going to be in New York? Are you planning on staying in New York? Are you one of these people who are diehard New York? I'm never leaving New York. Nowhere else to live.
Ooh, no, I'm not diehard New York. It kind of depends on where the work takes me, Yeah. But I have a great job that I love right now. So right now, I mean, I love Lehman College. I get to teach at a university that's 56% Latino and like 30% African American, Afro-diasporic.
Why is that? So why? I mean, is this word out that Lehman is that kind of college, and people who want to be in that environment go?
It's in the Bronx, and the Bronx, a lot of the students are from the Bronx, and the Bronx is very diverse. And then it just has to do with CUNY is accessible to people of color because it doesn't cost as much as a private university. So a lot of people go there because you can get a good education for an affordable price still. Yeah.
I mean, I graduated from UIC in Chicago, and that's what UIC was like. It used to be like that, right? University of Illinois, Chicago. But then they started raising the tuition. Yep. And now, they say about UIC, it's basically a private state school. And so you see less diversity, obviously. And it's right in the city.
Absolutely. Yeah. CUNY's still very diverse. They've raised the tuition a lot. I hope they stop. It used to be free. Can you believe that? It used to be a free institution. The problem is that as CUNY has become more an institution of people of color, the state and the city have disinvested from it. And so there's less and less money going into CUNY from outside. So as it's become browner, there's less money in and less just less investment and less, like the facilities are super old. I told you I love my university, but the facilities are super old. Sometimes like the projectors don't work, right? Like
they're trying to uninspire students.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, come on. It's ridiculous. But,
and that's the other thing. I mean, we were talking about how, why things are kind of, civilization seems to be devolving in some way. And that, yeah, it was easier as a young person back in the day, right? You had free or cheap colleges. You could move around easier. They do studies now that like there's no social mobility, but there's no mobility around the country. Like wherever you were born, that's probably where you stay your whole life. You never go anywhere. You never move. And that's how are you gonna make the best possible life if you're just gonna be stuck where you were born? Especially as immigrants, like we're immigrant culture. We know about moving. We know you go wherever the best life is, right? And if you're just not going to move, you don't have the resources to move.
Exactly. So yeah, I love my job, but I'm not a diehard New Yorker. I love New York though. I do think it's the greatest city in the United States.
I'm from Chicago, so I think it's too big. But anyways, one last question. I mean, I guess we'll end on the most important topic. I mean, what do you think about this whole coronavirus thing? I mean, how's New York doing? And how do you see it ending? When do you see it ending, and how?
Oh man, I don't see it ending given our current leadership. I think it's going to be, the fall is going to be online. I think this is going to go through the fall, maybe into the spring.
Cal State system, right? Just went online for the fall.
Yeah, I highly suspect that to happen for me as well. I
just
just
think
we have
being a teacher. I mean, being a professor. That's still, it's almost online is completely opposite of what college is supposed to be, right?
Yeah, I hate teaching online. I think it's awful. If I were a student, I would take the semester off, just because I wouldn't want to take all my classes online. For some students, actually, in the CUNY system, though, it's good for them because they work a lot of hours, so then they can do their classes online. So, but yeah, unfortunately, I think our leadership is trash. I'm not a big, obviously, just Trump, but I'm also not a big Cuomo fan. I don't think he's doing, I mean, I know like everyone's in love with him right now, but like the prison system is a mess. People are dying in prisons who like have a year left on their sentence. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like,
and the crisis that New York faced in the beginning was mostly his fault, right? He was gutting the healthcare system in New York.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just not a big fan of our leadership. I think we're going to reopen too soon because of economic reasons. We're already seeing that across the country with the virus striking. So I'm like not very optimistic, but I'm just in my life, I'm focusing on the fact that I'm lucky to have a job.
Yeah.
I have my health. I'm lucky my husband has a job, at least right now, knock on wood.
Yeah. Media's is looking grimmer than ever.
Yeah. So,
and the terrible thing about these reopenings is that you see like South Korea is a month ahead of us, Italy, and they reopened and now they're getting a wave again. South Korea is now on lockdown again, and other countries are going on lockdown now. And so we don't have to be able to tell the future. We can just look around the world, look at people who are ahead of us, and see what's happening there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, we're going to reopen, then we're going to close again, we're going to reopen and close again, we're going to reopen and close again. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to die that didn't need to die. That's my forecast.
Yeah, the World Health Organization just came out and said like 90%. What's up?
I forecasted that Trump was going to get elected, so.
I forecasted July 2016, Trump will win. That was my headline. But thank you very much for coming on. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh, you can find me on my website, www.melissacastilloplanas.com. You can find me on Instagram at Melissa Castillo Planas. You can find me on Facebook at Melissa Castillo Planas. You can find me on Twitter on Dr. Melly Castillo.
Oh, no.
Yeah, No, everything is the same. But yeah, find me.
And the book, A
connect-
Mexican State of Mind, New York City and the New Borderlands of Culture, out now. Came out in March, right?
Yeah, came out in March. It's from Rutgers University Press. It's available on Amazon. It's available at Barnes and Nobles.
Barnes and Nobles is still around? I love Barnes and Nobles. I mean, I live like in a suburb, so I don't see any.
At least online, it's still around online.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got to do anything to fight Amazon. You see Bezos is going to be a trillionaire? It's crazy, man.
Oh, my God.
It's like, it's not even war profiteering. It's like pandemic
the worst-
profiteering.
I think he's like the worst person on the planet, basically. That's how I feel about Bezos.
Power corrupts, you know. Can you be that powerful and be good? You know? Anyways, we'll leave it on that note. Thank you so much. It was nice talking to you. And stay healthy, stay healthy, stay happy, stay sane. And good luck grading those papers or whatever professors do.
Grade a lot of papers.
Godspeed. Keep running too.
All right.
Take care.
Yes.